Uh, this lecture is a short introduction to the entire course of the Holocaust. It's meant to be viewed at the beginning of the semester, and what I'm going to do is break it up into some small segments due to the 10-minute restriction here on YouTube to address some of the most frequently asked questions about the Holocaust. Not all of them, because many of them will be answered through your study of the Holocaust this semester. It's been over 60 years now since the most horrific war in history had ever taken place, World War II. Tens of millions of soldiers and civilians died as the war raged for 6 long years between the Axis armies of Germany and Japan primarily, and the armies of what we know now as the Allied forces of Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States. One civilian group in particular during that time period was targeted for mass, systematic, and complete destruction. The Nazis named this policy, which sought to wipe out all the Jews of the world, the final solution to the Jewish question. While it was not fully accomplished because the war ended, the Nazis, along with many of their collaborators, did succeed in the murder of 6 million Jews specifically, in what has now become known by historians as the Holocaust, or in Hebrew, the Shoah. There were other victims. The only group targeted for total worldwide annihilation were the Jews. So 60 years or more today after the fall of the Third Reich, the Nazi government, the memory of the Holocaust still remains a paradox. Museums, memorials, days of remembrance, and school lessons all are built around educating about the Holocaust. The Holocaust is frequently talked about in the press, in the media, in terms of its association with the Nazis. And despite the fact that a great many Europeans, while living in the very places that the murder of the Jews occurred and was carried out and was planned, know very little about this cataclysmic event that occurred right beneath their noses. Ignorance of the Holocaust, people who know very little about the Holocaust, find it easy to trivialize it, manipulate it, distort it, and even deny it. All which happens too frequently when we look at the Holocaust today. Ignorance also contributes to such people diminishing the Holocaust's significance through unbalanced comparisons to other historic events. So the Holocaust has emerged as a paradigm, if you may, a pattern of man's capacity to commit evil against his fellow man. Many people have reduced the complex and deep-rooted conflict that we see today and for many years between Israel and the Palestinians to a new and skewed version of the Holocaust. The Holocaust stands as a warning to all of mankind. Yet the warning has not been sufficient enough to prevent other genocides or genocide-like events from occurring. In the last 60 years, we've seen that happen. So for some people, the Holocaust is not a warning at all, but instead a model to be imitated. And in the name of imitating that model, we have seen genocidal events take place in Cambodia, Bosnia, Rwanda, Darfur. We see radical Islam also has become genocidal in its rhetoric and its intent, and its terrorists who have carried out attacks in the name of this ideology in an eerie, Nazi-like manner They have destroyed the sanctity of human life. So ignorance can be the only way we can battle the only way ignorance can be fought is battling it with knowledge, wisdom. That's how we can prevent future Holocaust, genocide, ethnic cleansing, and terrorism. So what is the Holocaust? Pretty hard to capsulize that, but I'm going to. The Holocaust was an attempt by the Nazis to murder every Jew. During World War II, with the help of many of their collaborators from various nations, they succeeded in the murder of 6 million Jews. 2 out of every 3 European Jew was murdered. Hitler became the Führer, the absolute power leader of Germany, in 1933, and many historians mark that as the beginning of the Holocaust. The systematic mass murder of Jews began in June of 1941 and evolved from shootings to murder by gas and crematorium ovens. By the end of the war, Europe was dominated by the Nazis and almost totally devoid of a Jewish presence. Genocide itself is a legal term and means the destruction of the essential foundations of the lives of a national group. The Holocaust, therefore, is an expression, arguably the most extreme expression of genocide. I'd like to end with a quote. Why is the Holocaust important for us to study? Is the Holocaust a singular event in history? And I'm going to take a direct quote, word for word, from Professor Yehuda Bauer, one of the world's most prominent scholars on the Holocaust at Yad Vashem, who I've had the distinct pleasure and honor of being a student in his class several times and listening to his lectures in person. And on the Task Force for International Cooperation on Holocaust Education, Professor Bauer said the following: "There is something unprecedented, frightening about the Holocaust of the Jewish people. For the first time in the blood-stained history of the human race, a decision developed in a modern state in the midst of a civilized continent to track down, register, mark, isolate from their surroundings, dispossess, humiliate, concentrate, transport, and murder every single person of an ethnic group as not defined by them. As defined not by them, but by the perpetrators, not just in the country where the genocidal motivation arose, not just on the continent of its planners first wish to control, but ultimately everywhere on earth, and for purely ideological reasons. The Holocaust happened in a world similar to ours. The Holocaust stands as a warning about man's capacity to commit wholesale murder in the name of an ideology.